Do you use the mountain forecast, Mary? Hi.
Hi, Jesse. Not that often, but
Good to know it's there.
I am going down next week to do some walks around from Glenorchy. So
Are you?
Yeah, so it'd probably be good.
Are you doing the root burn?
No, I've done that.
Yeah.
But this is just you stay at a backpackers and do a different walk each day. So you don't have to carry a heavy pack, which is...
That's great. There's the Mount Crichton Loop. I don't know if that's one of the ones
I think it is.
That's quite close to Glenorchy, yeah.
Is it? Yes. Yeah, that sounds familiar. Yeah.
What a beautiful part of the world
yeah,
you're going to.
It'll be fabulous, I think.
I've got a couple of eating recommends left to write down for you. You're probably all taken care of, are you?
Yes, but it'll probably be fairly basic backpacker sort of food. But that's all right. That's cool.
Oh, lucky you.
Yes,
and late summer.
Really looking forward to it.
Will be. Hey, Mary Holm's our personal finance expert, and she chooses a different topic each fortnight to talk about, related to money. And it's been a while since we talked about ethical investing.
Yes, yeah. And Barry Coates, who runs the Mindful Money website, sent me some information recently, and I thought, mostly pretty good news if you're somebody who supports ethical investing, and more people are, I think.
Barry Coates, as I recall, ex sort of finance, money guy from the big kind of corporate world.
No, he's a former Green Party MP.
Yeah, I thought he'd come from the world of money before that.
Not sure, to be honest.
I'll look it up and make sure we get it right. Sorry, Barry, if you're listening. But now has devoted his time to a website which explains the issues and information around investing.
If people, are at all interested in what their KiwiSaver fund or other funds invest in, the Mindful Money website makes it really easy to go and have a look at what your KiwiSaver provider's up to. And, they've done the dirty work and had a look at all the different shares they're invested in. And so I really recommend people having a look at that. And they've found that recently some of the largest KiwiSaver providers are actually making quite good progress on reducing their sort of, quote, unethical investments. The biggest fall that Mindful Money's seen in its 5 years running has been in KiwiSaver investment lately, in the 6 months ending last September, which is...
They're seeing less money go into harmful investments.
That's right.
Yeah. And that's how change happens, isn't it?
Yes, it is, yes. And providers are, moving their investments into nicer companies. The biggest change was in tobacco companies. In the 6 month period, they saw a 72% reduction in investment in tobacco companies. So KiwiSaver providers are basically getting out of those. And there was also a fairly big reduction, sort of a quarter to a third of reduction, 24 to 35% reduction in investments in weapons, gambling, products that test on animals or cause animal suffering, and alcohol. And then there were smaller reductions in pornography and adult entertainment, which is probably, I suspect, an area that people aren't as concerned about possibly as they are about tobacco and animal harm and that sort of thing. I'm just guessing there. But there was only a 7% reduction in environmental damage in investments in companies that cause environmental damage, which rather surprised me. Before I go on to my next point here, Barry said the changes in the general reduction in ethical investing, these changes should have a significant impact on share price and the cost of capital of companies causing harm. In other words, by investors moving out of investing in these companies, it makes them harder for them to do their business. And so it should sort of follow through and have an effect on them. Mm-hmm. But he still says that nearly $8 billion in KiwiSaver, that's out of $100 billion, so it's only 8%, but are in companies with issues like fossil fuels, weapons, animal cruelty and human rights violations. So there's still 8% in those sort of companies, which is, progress, I'd say.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's directly involved in fossil fuels, but I guess plenty of companies are using fossil fuels.
Yes.
To power their fleets.
That's right. I'm not sure where they draw the dividing line on that. The website probably explains that. But I think, yes, it's probably the oil companies, really. But Barry said KiwiSaver investors are still supporting the fossil fuel companies that are contributing to the flooding, wildfires, sea level rise and droughts that are causing massive suffering in our communities and in the poorest and most vulnerable communities, including our Pacific neighbours. So he's saying it's a little bit disappointing that the fossil fuel investments haven't gone down more. They also, Mindful Money has also picked out which particular providers are doing well and moving out of the bad companies.
Yeah.
And they include Pathfinder and Simplicity, are two that have done particularly well in that direction. But they're saying that there's also some bigger companies, bigger KiwiSaver providers. They singled out ASB and to a lesser extent AMP and ANZ are actually making quite a lot of progress in this area. So that's all good news if you approve of ethical investing.
Yeah. And it seems to indicate a bit of a mainstreaming of ethical investing. There was a time when you were probably a bit sort of out on your own if you were even interested in the ethics of where your money was going. I remember there was a big RNZ investigation, big morning reports when I think Guyan had done some work into, so apologies if it wasn't Guyan, seems like his sort of work anyway, a big kind of expose about where our money was going. And at that point, suddenly people seem to care all of a sudden.
Yes, that's
and now
right.
we're seeing that flow into what we're doing.
It's definitely becoming more and more of a mainstream thing. There's also an increase in what they call impact investing, which is not so much avoiding the naughty companies as investing particularly in the companies that invest in renewable energy, social housing. In other ways, companies that are particularly doing good stuff. There are various different types of ethical investing. There's that impact one where you go into companies that are doing well. There's the sort of basic one of avoiding the bad guys. There's some funds deliberately invest in companies that do environmentally dodgy stuff, etc., so they can go along to their annual meetings and have some influence, especially if you're a big fund manager. You might have considerable investments in the company and you can do that so that you can get them to straighten up their act. But so it's interesting. All of these different kind of movements are happening. Yeah. But there's another whole issue that is really behind all of this. Some investors, and probably quite a lot, don't mind if they make lower returns by being in ethical investing. They say, I'm prepared to make lower returns because I want to be in companies I like. But there are others who say, well, I'm prepared to do it, but I don't want to get a lower return if I do it. And so, and the question they often pose is, can you do well by doing good? So I was having a little look at the latest research on that. Yeah. And there are companies in America in particular, they're called the sin stocks, and they invest in alcohol, tobacco, gambling, sex-related industries, weapons manufacturers, building nuclear plants, selling components for landmines, companies with dodgy labour practices. There are funds in America that specialise just in investing in the sin stocks. And
you told me about this before, and this is aimed at investors who are like, humans are going to be humans, they're going to be attracted to the stuff, there's nothing we can do, we might as well make some money off the back of it. Yeah.
or they're big drinkers and big gamblers, or whatever. And when you go into, this is not from Mindful Money, but on Investopedia, which is actually rather a good website with general information about investments. Yeah. That's where I got some of this material from. They point out that some of the pluses of investing in sin stocks are that there tends to be a demand for those products regardless of what's happening in the economy. And that is true. Things like alcohol, gambling, pornography, etc. People they don't give those up. They're addicted and they can't give them up. And so they do well in poor economies. Another argument is that governments are discouraging new companies from coming into these industries, and so it makes it easier for the old ones to do well because they're not that much competition. But on the other hand, they could be outlawed or taxed suddenly. You're in an industry that and suddenly think the law changes, or they zap a higher tax on them. And so those companies do badly. And some of them are just dying industries.
Did you mention that you arguably are investing directly in evil practices?
Well, quite, yes. And, there's probably some people who do it just for the hell of it.
Yeah.
To say no one's going to tell me where to invest.
Yeah, I sort of relate to that.
Yeah. But so Barry Coates was having a look at this, and he said that despite the fact that oil prices increased because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, despite that, the value of fossil fuel companies is still 6.7% below the level it was 10 years ago. That's measured by an American share market index of those oil and gas companies. So it's 6.7% down over 10 years ago. Meanwhile, the market as a whole has gone up 260%, so gained hugely. And while it's gained, the fossil fuel companies have actually lost ground. And so that would suggest that they, in any case, have been a terrible investment in the last 10 years. Meanwhile, when you look more broadly, for the most part, ethical funds have done better in recent years than sin funds. So overall, they tend to at least do as well. There is one argument that says you should invest in both, because the broader your diversification, the better your investment strategy is. But I think we can conclude that you can be in ethical investments and you're not really sacrificing return, and possibly you're doing better than average.
That will make people feel good, right?
Yes, yeah. And why not?
We just had that conversation earlier, actually, with someone who's an expert on certification, Laura Gemmell, expert on certification, and she was talking about a survey that showed that Kiwis were willing to pay more to buy products that were sustainable. And she said, well, actually, that's got an assumption built into the question that you would have to pay more to buy them, or that those things would actually cost you more, when in many cases that's not the case. So same sort of thing here. Would you be willing to give up returns in order to invest in ethical KiwiSaver? Well, it turns out you might not have to make that decision.
That's right. You probably don't have to. Yes, indeed. Yeah, so things to look at with those two, with our conversation and your conversation with Laura put together, it suggests that, we're doing okay along those fronts, and we need a little bit of good news, Jesse.
Great.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary.
It's a pleasure, Jesse.
Okay, let me just make some corrections. It was, as I suspected, Anusha Bradley, fantastic investigative reporter, who broke that story in 2016 about KiwiSaver's funding cluster bombs. It was the cluster bombs that got everyone excited.
I remember that, yes. It was quite controversial.
Yeah, and as I recall, that actually led to some government changes around. There was at least some action and reaction to that.
And there have been, the government has said at different times that the default funds have to stay out of the nasty stocks, and there has been some government movement. Yes. So
Anusha, a great reporter and fellow Hillcrest High alum. Sorry for getting that wrong. Barry Coates from Mindful Money, who I sort of made up a bit of his career. Well, he's done all sorts, including the UK Social Investment Forum in the early 90s, did some management degree at Yale University, majored in finance, but he's been involved in this sort of ethical area for most of his life, including fair trade, and now he's running that Mindful Money.
Doing some good stuff, yes.
Great to see you, Mary. If you came in late and you want to go over some of those numbers again, Mary's conversations with me are podcasted. You can find them on the RNZ podcasts page on our website.